The day I turned my hidden language skills into sweet, sweet justice. So this happened about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still riding the high from what might be the most satisfying moment of my entire high school career. Buckle up, because this story has everything. Teenage cruelty, linguistic espionage, and revenge served ice cold in front of a packed classroom. Setting the scene, I'm a junior at a pretty standard American high school in Ohio. Nothing fancy, just your typical mix of cliques, cafeteria drama, and teachers who've clearly given up on life. This particular saga takes place in my AP Calculus class. Yeah, I know, I'm a glutton for punishment. At the beginning of the semester, we got two new students, exchange students from Italy. Let's call them Sophia and Julia, not their real names, obviously. They were both your typical European exchange students, designer clothes, perfect hair, that effortless confidence that comes from being exotic in a sea of Midwestern blandness. Here's where it gets interesting. These two girls always ended up sitting directly behind me. I'm talking every single class without fail. Whether I sat front row, back row, middle, didn't matter. It was like they had some sort of homing beacon programmed to plant themselves right in my personal space. We'd never spoken, not once. I minded my own business, they minded theirs. Classic American high school social dynamics. Different worlds, parallel universes, whatever you want to call it. But here's the kicker that they didn't know. I speak Italian fluently. The plot thickens. My dad's side of the family is Italian-American, and my nana, grandmother, refused to let the language die with her generation. Every summer from age 5 to 15, I spent 2 months in Sicily with my relatives. By the time I was 12, I was dreaming in Italian. But here's the thing. I never advertised this skill. It's not like I walked around school wearing a Ciao Bello t-shirt or anything like that. So there I was, sitting in calculus class last Tuesday, frantically scribbling notes about derivatives and limits, when Sophia and Julia launched into their daily Italian commentary session. Usually it was just boring stuff about homework or complaints about American food. I'd learned to tune it out. But this particular day, their conversation took a sharp left turn into personal attack territory. The moment everything changed. We were taking notes from the board, some complex equation that was making my brain hurt, when I heard Sophia's voice behind me, crystal clear in Italian. Ugh, his giant head is blocking my view of the board. I froze. Did she just... Then Julia chimed in, and her words hit me like a freight train. What a fat little piece of shit. The pen in my hand stopped moving. My blood pressure spiked. But they weren't done. Sophia continued. If only he would move his ugly ass out of the way. And then Julia delivered the killing blow. The funniest part is that he probably thinks he's actually attractive. Look at him sitting there all confident. Pathetic. They dissolved into giggles, making jokes about how clueless I was, how they had no idea what they were saying. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was absolutely furious. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to whip around and unleash a torrent of Italian profanity that would make my Sicilian cousins proud. But I was also terrified. Confrontation has never been my strong suit, and the shock of hearing such vicious words had completely paralyzed me. I spent the rest of that class period plotting my revenge. The setup. Fast forward to Friday. Same class, same seating arrangement, same two girls behind me. I walked into that classroom like a man on a mission. I'd spent 3 days planning this moment, running through different scenarios in my head. The beauty of revenge is that it's best served when your enemies least expect it, and Sophia and Julia had no clue what was coming. I sat down, pulled out my notebook, and waited. They were chatting away in Italian as usual. Something about weekend plans and how boring American parties are. Standard stuff. I was a coiled spring, ready to strike at the perfect moment, the perfect storm. About 20 minutes into class, Mr. Henderson, our calculus teacher, and a genuinely nice guy who definitely didn't deserve what was about to happen, was writing a particularly complex formula on the board. The man was clearly struggling. Calculus isn't exactly his specialty, and it showed. As he was writing, he made a spelling error. Instead of derivative, he wrote derivative. The entire class noticed, but nobody said anything. We all just sat there in that awkward silence that happens when a teacher makes a mistake and everyone's too polite to point it out. That's when I heard it. Julia, in a whisper that was just loud enough for me to catch, muttered in Italian, "What a dirty asshole." The classroom was dead silent, except for the sound of chalk on blackboard. This was it. This was my moment. The stars had aligned, the universe had delivered the perfect opportunity for justice, and I was ready to seize it. The perfect moment. I turned around slowly, and I mean movie slow motion slowly, until I was facing both girls directly. The look of casual indifference on their faces quickly shifted to confusion as they realized I was staring right at them. Then, in a voice that carried across the entire silent classroom, I said, "Did you just call Mr. Henderson a dirty asshole?" The effect was immediate and beautiful. Julia's mouth fell open like she'd seen a ghost. Julia went completely white, and I'm talking vampire pale white. The rest of the class, which had been in that post-mistake awkward silence, suddenly became dead silent for an entirely different reason. Mr. Henderson stopped writing mid-letter and turned around. "Excuse me?" I kept my eyes locked on Sophia and Julia as I continued. "These two just called you a sporco stronzo in Italian. That translates to dirty asshole, in case you're wondering." The beautiful aftermath. What happened next was pure poetry. Sophia immediately started stammering in broken English, trying to deny everything. No, we don't, that's not. Julia went with the panic strategy. "He's lying, we weren't even talking." But Mr. Henderson isn't stupid. He looked at me, then at them, then back at me. "You speak Italian," I replied, still maintaining eye contact with my tormentors. "Fluently. Have been since I was 12. The realization hit Sophia and Julia like a brick wall. I watched as every conversation they'd ever had behind me flashed through their minds. Every insult, every cruel joke, every moment they thought they were operating in secret, all of it had been heard and understood. Sophia actually put her face in her hands. Julia looked like she might throw up. Justice served. Mr. Henderson, to his credit, handled the situation with more grace than I probably would have. He quietly asked Sophia and Julia to step outside, where I imagine he had a very uncomfortable conversation with them about respect and appropriate classroom behavior. They ended up getting detention for the rest of the week, plus a meeting with the principal about cultural sensitivity and respectful communication. I later heard through the grapevine that their host families were also notified about the incident. But the real victory wasn't the official punishment. It was the look on their faces when they realized they'd been caught. It was the way they couldn't make eye contact with me for days afterward. It was the sweet, sweet taste of justice served at exactly the right temperature. The aftermath. The story spread through school like wildfire, as these things do. I went from that quiet guy in calculus to the kid who speaks secret Italian and destroyed those exchange students. My social stock definitely went up a few points. Sophia and Julia eventually apologized, a very awkward, stilted apology that felt more like damage control than genuine remorse. But I accepted it graciously because, let's be honest, I'd already gotten my revenge in the most spectacular way possible. They still sit behind me in class sometimes, but now they're dead silent. No more Italian commentary, no more cruel observations, just a sound of pencils on paper and the occasional nervous cough. The lesson. Look, I'm not saying what I did was entirely mature. Maybe I should have confronted them privately or talked to the teacher beforehand. But sometimes, when someone thinks they're invisible and untouchable, the best response is to remind them that the world is smaller than they think. Also, pro tip, never assume someone doesn't speak your language, especially in America. We're a melting pot for a reason, and you never know who's been quietly listening to your conversations. As my nonna always says, la vendetta è un piatto che va servato freddo. Revenge is a dish best served cold. And let me tell you, this dish was absolutely freezing. Edit. A lot of people are asking if I feel bad about getting them in trouble. Honestly, not really. They spent weeks making cruel comments about me, thinking I was too stupid to understand. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come with a side of public humiliation. Edit 2. For those asking about my Italian skills, yes, I really am fluent. Spent 10 summers in Sicily, lived with my cousins, learned everything from proper grammar to creative profanity. It's a beautiful language, even when it's being used to insult people. Edit 3. No, I don't think this makes me a bad person. They were bullies who got caught. The fact that they were doing it in another language doesn't make it any less cruel or hurtful. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Top comments. Dude, this is absolutely legendary. As someone who speaks 4 languages, I can't tell you how many times I've caught people talking shit about me or others, thinking nobody understands. The look on their faces when you reveal you've been listening the whole time is chef's kiss, perfection. I had a similar experience in Prague. 2 German tourists at a restaurant were loudly complaining about how these stupid Czech waiters don't understand proper service in German. Little did they know, I'm Austrian, and the waiter was my cousin who also speaks German fluently. We let them finish their entire meal before my cousin walked up to their table and in perfect German said, "I hope you enjoyed your meal despite our terrible Czech service." The silence was deafening. Justice tastes so much sweeter when served in multiple languages. Comment. Bello. Your nonna raised you right. My grandson had something similar happen at his university in Boston. These two French exchange students kept making comments about American students being culturally ignorant during lectures. What they didn't know is that my grandson spent his gap year in Lyon working at a vineyard. One day they were particularly nasty, calling the professor an imbécile complet during a history lecture about World War II resistance movements. My grandson stood up and in perfect French said, "Perhaps you'd like to share your commentary about Professor Williams being a complete imbecile with the entire class." The French girls were so embarrassed, they switched to a different section. Sometimes people need to learn that assumptions make an ass out of you and me, no matter what language you speak. La familia italiana sempre vince. Comment. As a high school teacher, I have to say, good for you, but also props to Mr. Henderson for handling it professionally. We deal with stuff like this more often than people realize, especially with exchange students who think they're above American education. Last year, I had two Spanish exchange students who kept calling me profesora estúpida during my AP biology class. Joke's on them. I lived in Barcelona for 3 years after college. I let it slide for about a week because I wanted to see how far they'd take it. Finally, during a parent-teacher conference conducted entirely in Spanish, much to their horror, I casually mentioned to their host parents that las chicas parecen tener algunas opiniones muy interesantes sobre mi estilo de enseñanza. Their faces went white. The girls ended up writing me a 5-page apology essay in English about respect and cultural understanding. Sometimes the best lessons happen outside the textbook. Author. Holy shit, that's amazing! The parent conference reveal is next-level psychological warfare. Respect. Comment. Wait a minute. Are you talking about Mr. Henderson at Westfield High? Because if so, I think I know exactly who those Italian girls are, and this story just made my entire year. I'm in AP Calc with Henderson too, different period, and Sophia and Julia are in my chemistry class. They've been acting weird and super quiet lately, and now I know why. They used to be so loud and confident, always making comments in Italian during labs. Suddenly last week, they just stopped. This explains everything. You're a legend, my dude. Mr. Henderson is genuinely one of the nicest teachers in the school and didn't deserve their crap. Also, can you teach me some Italian curse words? Asking for a friend. Author. Haha, I can neither confirm nor deny the school, but if the shoe fits. And sorry, my nonna would disown me if I taught random people how to swear in Italian. Learn it the proper way, through years of listening to your relatives argue at Sunday dinner. Comment. This story hits different because I was the exchange student who got caught once, and it was mortifying, but also the best lesson I ever learned. I was studying in Japan during college, and my Japanese was, let's say, conversational at best. I was constantly complaining to my German roommate in German about how difficult everything was, how weird Japanese customs seemed, typical ignorant exchange student stuff. One day we were on the train, and I was being particularly obnoxious, loudly complaining in German about how crowded and uncomfortable everything was. This elderly Japanese man sitting across from us just smiled politely the whole time. When we reached our stop, as we were getting off, the old man looked at me and in perfect German said, "I hope your time in Japan becomes more enjoyable as you learn to appreciate our culture." I wanted to disappear into the floor. Turns out he lived in Berlin for 20 years as a young man. I was so ashamed, I actually sought him out the next day to apologize properly. Best thing that ever happened to me, though, made me realize what an ass I was being and completely changed how I approached the rest of my exchange. Now I work in international education, helping students avoid exactly this kind of cultural insensitivity. Moral of the story? The world is smaller than you think, and someone is always listening. Comment. Great story, OP. This is exactly the kind of content we love to see here. Perfect setup, excellent execution, and satisfying resolution. However, please remember our community guidelines about doxing. Keep those school and real name details vague, which you've done perfectly. This story is getting cross-posted to MaliciousCompliance and Instant Karma with your permission. The linguistic revenge angle is Chef's Kiss. Flair, NuclearRevenge. Author. Thanks for the flair. Cross-post away. The more people who learn not to underestimate quiet kids, the better. Write what you think about this situation. Also, if you like this video, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos. See you next time. Bye-bye.